proximity of the films to popular imagination is explained by situating them within the paradigm of the African popular culture. This paradigm makes it easier to understand the bond that exists between the films and the audience's response, given that it posits popular culture as being, at the same time, both the source and the end of the product. The fact that the audience and the performers of popular art originate from the same masses introduces a certain dynamic into the relationship between producer and consumer. One must highlight the active role played by members of the audience in building meaning into the films that they watch and applying it to themselves. In a survey that I carried out, one of the respondents attributed to the films the ability to change people. According to this lady, most of the acting is what happens to us on a daily basis. Even if you're a wicked person, by seeing the lessons in the movies, you will have a change of heart by relating to a character on screen. It checkmates one's character, helps us improve our financial habits. You will see from this kind of response the great force that films have, especially films which the people identify with. Because when we watch those films, we're able to say, well, that lady reminds me of my aunt. That event happened to me last week. And so people connect better. So a common response in that survey is that people indicated that they learned a lot from the films. In the words of one of the respondents, as I watch these Nollywood films, I avoid many things through the experience of what happens in the films. The films teach people about how life is. You can see from this really the great tool that we have in these films. Tools either for good or for evil. So who is telling those stories? This teaching role that films play is one that the Catholic Church has long recognized. According to St. Pope John Paul II, from its very beginnings, the Catholic Church has recognized the importance of the means of social communication as useful tools for making better known and appreciated those human and religious values which support the maturing of the individual. This calls for a strong sense of responsibility from those who work in this sensitive sector. Cinema allies itself with these means, availing itself of a language of its own, which allows it to reach people of different cultures. And we see that film is seen as a powerful medium that should be respected, used responsibly, and engaged with critically and creatively. It can serve as a means of moral instruction, cultural dialogue, and spiritual reflection when aligned with truth and human dignity. In his 1936 encyclical on motion pictures, Pope Pius XI emphasized the profound influence of cinema on public morals and called for Catholic action in producing and promoting morally sound films. Pope Francis, on his part, emphasized the need to tell good stories. In his message on World Communication Day in 2020, he stated, "Human beings are storytellers. From childhood, we hunger for stories, just as we hunger for food. Stories influence our lives, whether in the form of fairy tales, novels, films, songs, news, even if we do not always realize it. Often, we decide what is right or wrong based on characters and stories we have made our own. Stories leave their mark on us. They shape our convictions and our behavior. They can help us understand and communicate who we are." Let us now return to our earlier question. How does Nollywood imagine Christianity? There are some films that are distinguished from other genres by being tagged as Christian films, Nollywood films which are called Christian films. Such films are produced with a clear evangelical purpose. One author labels these films as the Hallelujah genre. and describes them as a reactionary effort by the Christian community to check the moral degeneration of the Nigerian society. The films usually involve the representation of the occultic, which people turn to as a means of seeking a better earthly life, while the church is depicted as a place to obtain redemption through Jesus Christ. Another author represents the Christian film as a depiction of war between the supernatural forces of good and evil for the soul of man. These films tend to be quite dramatic in what one can call a fire and brimstone style. Key producers here may be familiar to you. Producers like Mike Bamiloye of Mount Zion Faith Ministries and Helen Okpabio of the Liberty Foundation Gospel Ministry. These are some of the key producers of this type of films. As you can see, they're Pentecostals. Okay, and the producers largely tend to be primarily Pentecostal. Uka, reflecting on these films, points out that the films are tools used by some Pentecostal pastors to popularize their ministries. According to him, by attributing poverty, illness, lack of progress, and all other unwanted occurrences to the agency of evil spirits, Satan, malign forces of witchcraft and sorcery located in the primal local culture, a perspective is created that privileges Pentecostal actors as undoing this cultural world. The pastor excavates it, reworking its power configurations according to the mind and will of God. You'll see how attractive this will be to many people if you now link it very closely to our culture. Remember that I said earlier that the films reflect the reality in our society. And of course, if people are not so deeply rooted in their faith, as it were, when they see these things, then they of course will stream to the church because they believe that this pastor can resolve my problems, as it were. So really, the such films do become key evangelizing tools for the groups that put them out. However, the question, as yet another author put it, is whether this is a sufficient portrayal. This portrayal may not necessarily be wrong, but neither is it absolutely accurate. Yet it may be seen as incomplete because the biblical perspective of Christianity depicts it as a way of life which cuts across every aspect of human life. The Christian life is not always about warfare between the evil forces and angelic forces in the spiritual realm. The behavioral conduct of a Christian also matters. Hence, a representation that is restricted to a battle between marine spirits and angelic forces may not be sufficient. In this regard, one can quote the words of St. John Paul II, who said, "To speak of the cinemas is, in the first place, to call to mind the very complex sector of creativity and of film production. Here are some subjects," he says, "on which you could meditate deeply with producers and actors. Do they seek the promotion of real human values? Do they give religious and specifically Christian values their rightful place?" Away from the genre of these Christian films, we do find in the other types of films we have in Nollywood a constant reference to things Christian. But oftentimes, these references are superficial and sometimes merely serve as a backdrop for resolving a plot conflict. Some common Christian themes in Nollywood: you have the theme of forgiveness. This tends to be very common. You have the reality that there's always a punishment for sin. This is one of the good things about our themes, that yes, a fellow can do all sorts of dastardly things, but at the end, there's always that expectation that this person will be punished. Okay, so the sense of retribution is always there. And then the combat between Christians and evil, usually the devil. Miracles as a manifestation of faith, that yes, people say express your faith by performing miracles. This also tends to be fairly common. Then the contrast between hard work, honesty and simplicity with vice, deceit, easy riches. So you usually will have two characters, one who is good and hardworking, another one who is a contrast, who is bad. And they show how one progresses and how the other one suffers, so on and so forth. But also, it does happen that sometimes Christianity is presented as something rather unattractive. It's drab. So the character who is wicked is one who is having all the fun in life. Okay, who is doing fantastic things, who has lots of money, so on and so forth. And then the one who is hardworking and so on, who is not doing so well, that's the one that's a Christian. So there's a bit of that distortion also. Riches are also presented as an indication of collusion with the devil. As many times is presented, you cannot make it big as a Christian by being honest. No, it's the bad guys who make it, who are doing well, who are flashy. The themes also sometimes present the Christian as someone that is not fully involved in the realities of the world, which is a false view. It presents the faith as something transactional, that people only turn to God when they hit rock bottom or after they have had some serious shock. Then they turn to God. They look for salvation. The devil is presented also as a powerful opponent. Christianity, on the other hand, is presented as something that requires a change of life, or that leads to a change of life. But then there are also films that deal nicely with Christian values. Films that present, maybe not in an explicit way, but it's built into the story. One of the ones I like so much is a scene in Lionheart. This is the film of Genevieve Nnaji. It's a film in which the family is having dinner together. And the warmth that comes from that, you have the generations of the family, the warmth, the camaraderie that is in that scene, shows you really the values of the family. And you do find that various films, in one way or the other, manifest this. I thought that I would speak a little bit more about a couple of films. When I was discussing this with Father Ken, he expressed that interest in knowing how the films, the presentation of Christianity in these films has evolved from 1992, which is the date we put, the formal date for the start of the industry, and now. Has there been any change? I found a very, very interesting case that I could use for this, which is to use the first film, the film that is set to mark the formal start of the industry. Do you know which film that is? Which is it? Well done. Living in Bondage, okay? To use Living in Bondage, and you know that they made a sequel. They made a sequel, when was that now? 3-4 years ago? You know the title? Right, Living in Bondage, Breaking Free. So it was interesting because it's the same, it's really following some of the same characters. Okay, so those who know that story, you know that in Living in Bondage there is the story of Andy, a Lagos businessman who joins a secret cult. I mean, he's envious of those who have money. He's not doing well, and he's envious of his friend and the friends of his friend who are millionaires are doing well, and he wants to be there as well. And of course, they invite him to join their cult, in which they sell themselves or give themselves to the devil. And the goal is for him to gain greater financial success. But then, as is told, repeated in the film, if you want something, you must give something. And so he's asked to go and kill his wife as a sacrifice. And his wife is someone who he loves very much. And of course, the woman also, a dedicated woman, very good, etc., etc. But anyhow, Andy makes that decision, and at some point he tries to deceive them by he picks up a prostitute and takes her there, but it's discovered, and he eventually he ends up killing his wife. Now, it's very striking that this first film, Living in Bondage, it's not what you would call, in the style of the other ones I spoke about, a Christian film. But it speaks very positively about various Christian virtues. You find the wife, Merit, is presented as a virtuous woman, hardworking, who gives her everything to her husband. Her in-laws speak very well of her. She is really a key force in the family, so on and so forth. A virtuous woman who just wants to do good. She advises her husband not to worry that you don't have anything. It doesn't matter. Focus on what is good. Don't go into evil, etc. Okay, so the virtuous woman. Defending her virtue, okay, because we also see her fighting in some moments to defend her virtue. It speaks of loyalty, which is one of the core one of the core values that we have, really. And the film also focuses very much on patience and trusting God in hard times. That's repeated often. And when asked to sacrifice his wife, Andy responds, "Please, I go to church. If I do this, I will go to hell." Okay, so he recognizes that, even though he eventually does it. And the response of the cult head is like a mini catechesis there. Because the head of the cult says, "My brethren, never allow anyone to mislead you. The church tells us falsely that there is hellfire. The Holy Bible proclaims God's kindness. Let me ask you, will you condemn your beloved to hellfire? Yes, we will wrong him, but he will forgive us. Has anyone ever returned from the dead to tell us what hell is like? It is true. Death is the price of sin for everyone and everything. Even the trees, the birds, and the fish in the sea die. So who is exempted from death?" Okay, this is really the head of the cult who is saying this. And then in that scene where they're about to kill this other woman, and she calls out, "Jesus," okay, which shocks them and throws them back, so that the name Jesus is presented as a name that saves. The woman who calls out his name, stuns them by calling out his name. And afterwards, when they are forced to release her, she says to someone else, "I don't know what made me cry out. Cry out that I am covered by the blood of Jesus. And they left me. That was my Savior. Let me tell you, that name, Jesus, that's the name I shall worship henceforth." Once again, remember that this is not an explicitly Christian film, but this is built into the story. And this lady then abandons prostitution because that encounter with Jesus leads to a change of life. And this is a regular theme in the films. Then we have at some point when somebody, after Andy has killed his wife, somebody accuses him, saying to him, "That which you did in secret, thinking that nobody saw you, God saw you." Okay? And Andy's father also says, "Only God knows about her death." So you see that in this film, there are many references. There are many reflections of Christian truths built in. It's a bit different when we come to Living in Bondage, Breaking Free, which comes a sequel that was made 25 years after it's set 25 years after the event of the original film, and the film itself comes 22 years after that first one was made. We see that many of these references are downplayed. In this new film, the one we're dealing with is Andy's son. Andy's son, a grown man now. Andy didn't know he has a child. And really, because at the end of the first film, Andy goes mad, but is rescued, because we also see the theme of forgiveness, because a prostitute encounters him, forgives him, prays for him, takes him to her church, and he's saved. That's at the end of the first film. In this second one, we see that Andy has now become a pastor. He's the head of a church. Okay, and so on. So that changed in life. But now his son, who doesn't know his father, because the father didn't even know he had a son. The wife left him, and the second wife left him and had the child afterwards. But the son is also now dragged into this cult thing, because the son also, the desire for riches, for wealth, and so on, he ends up meeting the same group the group of 6 who were involved in the first one. And so it says here, it says of the boy, like I said, the references are fewer. He was complaining bitterly and blaming God for neglecting him. Okay, this is what one of the characters says of the young man. And there's a moment of thanksgiving to God for the one who has brought him up is giving thanksgiving or giving thanks to God that her son has returned. And Nnamdi, in a moment of happiness that he has received a huge amount of money, says, anyone that sees God should thank him for me. Okay? There's a scene set in the church, an attack in the church, and very curiously, the main bad guy, who is presented really as the evil itself, says at some moment, ironically, God is really something, isn't he? When you find the evil fellow saying this, okay, it's rather ironic. There's also a focus on justice. That's value of justice. We find also a confrontation between Andy and the bad guy, Stephen, in the church with quotations from the Bible, loosely given. Stephen. Now, back to the point that these films reflect what people see as happening in society. Stephen, the evil fellow, tempts Andy with an offer to make him a mega church pastor. I can make you a pastor. You have a huge congregation. You have a lot of money, so on and so forth. Well, I think we've all heard the stories going around in society that some of these churches, well, this is behind them. So it's something that is floating in the air in society, and you see it being reflected here as well. And he said to Andy, do you know how many pastors come and get their powers from us? So, well, okay, fine. It goes on, but the point is that there are fewer references in this latter film than in the first one. Okay? So, is this really a sign that perhaps things have been toned down a bit? It's not conclusive, but it's just an idea that could be the case. So, as already indicated, the screen culture of Nollywood is a reflection of the culture of the wider society, and this consideration is important for understanding that if any manifestation is missing on screen, then it is either not a strong enough reality or that it is deliberately being kept off screen. And we'll have to ask the question, how present is a thing's Catholic on screen? I think the Catholic Church is one that is easily recognizable through its many symbols. There's so many things. And this is what people capitalize on. So you will find somebody dressed in the habit of a priest or a nun, or if somebody wearing a rosary to indicate that this person's religion. But it's not an in-depth kind of thing. There's a saying in the Black Book, which was hugely popular a couple of years back, in which the lady gets out of a cab and she hasn't even entered the church. As she gets out of the cab, stops in front of the church and makes a sign of the cross before entering the church. I don't think we do that. So there you see that kind of, and then the way the one who was supposed to be a priest, actually they used the scene of the Lagos Cathedral, and the one who was supposed to be the priest, you're wondering, is this the priest of the cathedral, the way he's dressed? And so you will find that there's a bit of ignorance in that sense. And we cannot easily, there may be Catholic filmmakers in the industry, but we cannot easily point to their impact. There is a need to promote films that deal with themes such as compassion, redemption, justice, and the human condition from a Christian perspective, to present ordinary life lived as a Christian. I don't know if any of you has ever seen in any film a very good Christian who is also very rich and doing very well, just doing his work well and doing it meticulously well. You see that we do not have that impression. Usually the Christian is presented in more extraordinary circumstances, but this is what we have to be able to present. That you do have Christians who are hardworking, who are meticulous. This is really what should mark us out. So what should be the goal for Catholics? That we have to step into the breach. We have to do more. What's happening? And then we see that now you can say, although I have focused solely on Nollywood, but we have a wonderful opportunity with social media. These days, the gatekeepers have been removed. Everybody has access. What kind of content I'm sorry to be critical, but many times you find the kind of content being posted, somebody takes a nice picture of the eba he's about to eat and says, I am having fun. I'm sorry, but what use is that? So, what should be the goal? The goal has to be that we use this wonderful tool. For those who perhaps are interested in filmmaking, well, enter the industry. The cinema has to be a means of evangelizing, but not by producing preachy stuff. We have to be able to tell good stories. Okay, this is the way it should be done. Stories that are entertaining, but at the same time pass valuable lessons. This has to be what guides us really in the production of content. I'll just end with a quotation from Saint Jose Maria Escrivá, who says, if responsible Catholics, with complete agreement in their common denominator, and also with their different views in debatable matters, are not involved in temporal questions, this field will easily fall into the hands of those who do not consider the principles of the natural law, society's true common good, or the rights of the Church. These are people, moreover, who don't generally respect opinions contrary to their own. That is to say, without the Christian spirit of respecting certain untouchable principles and respecting the legitimate freedom of choice in debatable matters, there can be no peace. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Please, another round of applause. Another big round of applause for Dr. Obiaya. That was such an interesting. I thought he's a good storyteller. I love your voice, Doctor, right away. That was such a beautiful presentation. Hope you learned a lot. So now if you're pressing your phone and you're watching TV, the perspective at which you're looking at these things will change now. Yeah. So how are we feeling? How are we feeling? All right. Seatbelt signs are still on, but you can lift your hand up at this point. So we're moving straight to the next session, the next part of this presentation, the Q&A session. We know the rules. One. I see you, sir. 1, 1, 1, and then 1 in the online community. So I have one hand up there at the back. Victor. One hand here. The middle section, there's nobody. We can skip it to another person. Okay, so we get 2 from there, 1 from here, and then 1 from those online. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for the, can I call it a presentation? My name is Henry Ibrahim from Yola Diocese. I think my question is more like an observation. Towards the end or concluding part of your presentation, you made mention that there are no, if there are, but we can't see the signs and the handwork of Catholic movie producers in the industry because it's not showing in their products. And you also urge that there should be a projection of films that talks about the themes of empathy, justice, and what have you. Now, you know, people who are in the industry are actually concerned about profit making, and they actually try to mirror the society in such a way that it goes with what is in vogue in the society so that the movies would actually sell. And unfortunately, as you know, we find ourselves now in Nigeria particularly, most of the themes that will actually be deduced from our society are that of, you know, get rich quick syndrome. The issue of the yahoos, the issue of the ritual killings and what have you. So there are more of vices than virtues and other, you know, positive aspect of our social living. So, and that is why some of these movie producers tend to go or tilt towards, you know, picking such kind of themes to portray in their movies. So I suggest, or I think, maybe one of those things that we should do, it's not just to encourage them to mirror that in their production, but also to go back to the root in the society, to encourage these values right from the family level, at the church level, and at other social institutions. In that way, it is the prevailing, socio-cultural and economic circumstance in the society that, movie producers actually key into to produce what they dish out to the public, for consumption. Thank you.
It's actually a contribution.
Thank you, Doc. My name is Jeremiah from Abuja Archdiocese. Now, mine will also come as a contribution. When we watch movies that depict Catholicism, we usually see that the directors have not done their homework well. They have not done their homework. In other climes, before people act, you want to act a doctor, sometimes you go closer to the hospital for months, learn their body languages and things they do before you come and take the role of a doctor. We watch Nigerian movies where priests wear rosaries on top of their soutane, where reverend sisters are dressing like block rosary girls, and some of our church leaders know these directors. I think they should be brought closer and be schooled. Even though they be Catholics, if someone is acting a Catholic, he cannot even make sign of the cross. They distinguish our priests among powerful priests and non-powerful priests. So if they want to do Catholic films, let them come closer to the Catholic Church. Let the Catholic Church, I was privileged to follow a producer, a director, so that I guide them on what the priest should wear at a particular time. Sometimes these directors don't know what they should, and instead of projecting the church in a good light, they do so in a bad light. A woman from Akwa Ibom State, I've forgotten her name, who usually protest Pentecostal movie, had some movies that were direct attack to the church, against the church. And this is where some persons in our church, like the knights, should come up. They are knights, they should come up and see some of these producers who project the church in bad lights. We are a Catholic priest, we pray and pray, nothing will happen. And then a Pentecostal pastor will come and pray, something will happen. We are a Catholic priest wearing blue soutane, or wearing chasuble along the road, or the bishop is wearing mitre inside a car. These things are not Catholic practices. Our directors should be brought closer and schooled before they go on set.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you, sir, for this contribution. All right, it's a question, but it's born out of a concern. I wanted to ask if there is a regulatory body, as it were, that can curtail some of the excesses that he raised. This is not directly Nollywood now, but sometime in 2023, Davido released, a music scene, all right? And he presented Islam in a derogatory way, and he was criticized. And after the criticism from Islamic organizations and popular individuals, he apologized publicly and took down the video, right? But a similar thing happened when Ashake released a song like that presented a Catholic church in a derogatory way. He was criticized, but I don't think the force was enough to make him to even come and make a formal public statement about that and take it down afterwards. So the question is, are there regulatory bodies that can curtail some of these, very extreme excesses like that, so that we bring, proper context to our faith? I believe that the systems that are available in the Catholic Church alone, if the attention is drawn to it, is sufficient enough to bring regulation to some of these outright misrepresentations of the faith. Thank you. Okay, my name is Joshua. I'm from Navy Diocese.
Ave. So my question is it wrong as a Catholic and Christian to enjoy horror or action-packed movies? And also, because I'm asking this because sometimes why I don't watch Nigerian movies is because the dialogues are bad, it's not witty, and then by the time you listen, you're like, oh my God, this doesn't look like a conversation I can have with someone. So, and is it wrong to like this kind of things? And is it wrong to kind of like movies like also is like 2.5 Men, where the dialogue is witty and can, portray double meanings to what people say? Is that wrong to enjoy as a Christian?
Thank you so much for those questions. Anything from the online community? All right. All right, sir, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your questions. Let me take the last one first. Really, maybe the question we should be asking or clarifying is, what really should guide us in determining what we should do or not do? It's a question one can throw back to you, okay? But I would say that as a Christian, it's a question of, are you doing something to please God, or is it something that will displease God? And of course, it means that if I am enjoying this thing, is it displeasing to Him or not? I think that that's a primary question we ask for everything, okay? Now, what is there in a horror film? It's just a film. Is a horror scene sinful? I wouldn't say so. Of course, there are films and there are films. If you see a horror film with pornography built in, something is wrong there. Okay? But you know that I believe it's Aristotle who speaks about the willing suspension of disbelief. When we watch films, we suspend disbelief because we are aware that this is not real. Okay, so I'm watching a horror film on which aliens descend to the earth and are attacking. I'm enjoying the thrill of it. However, in everything, like in everything, there are limits. If I am watching something which is tremendously violent, of course that has its negative impact. Then clearly that one would say it's best not to watch this. What I think is, it's always good to keep in mind, what kind of impact will this content have on me? Is it going to lead me subsequently to do something silly? Then we need to protect ourselves, to draw the line somewhere. But as a genre in itself, I wouldn't say there's anything that you would say is wrong with that. Then to go back, to go to the first, although he said it was a comment, not a question, profit making versus telling stories that contain a lot of value. I don't think the two things are opposed. There's a lovely film, I can't remember now which country it was made, but it's a very touching film about a young father who has been diagnosed with cancer, a single father, and he's dying. But he has a son who is about 3 years old. And so the film is focused on the father's concern. What's going to happen to my son when I die? And he spends the whole film trying to find a home for this boy. Now, there's a lot of emotion, it's very touching, but then you see the values, the connection between the father and the son. Clearly you would say, okay, this fellow is trying to transmit certain values in this film. But you see that the story is so well told that it'll also make him money. And I think we find that any good film, really, good films you will find are the ones that leave you with something lasting and are very well told stories. Good films. So I don't think that that's a problem, that you say because the people want to make money that they should not also tell good stories. No, quite on the contrary. You should be able to tell entertaining stories. Entertaining stories should not at the same time cut out the need to give values. Nobody wants a preachy film, clearly. We want films that will entertain us but at the same time educate us. So I don't think the two things are contrary, although I do like what you say and how you put it. The second question here, the need for Catholics, that needs for those who are doing things with relating to Catholics should go for greater guardians. Well, I'm sorry, they will not come because it is not in their interest. Okay? They will see it as, no, this for me is just an additional thing. My goal is not to defend the Catholic faith or protect it. That's not my business. They will not come. And so we are the ones who need to enter the space. And I heard something like this yesterday as well, in which I think it was, I can't remember what the point was, but someone said, well, the hierarchy of the church should step in and do something. And it's a similar thing you said, that the knights should come up and sue some of these professionals. I'm sorry, but we are the church. We all are the church. We see these things, we should be the ones also complaining. We should be the ones taking action. So you see that if all of us come together and make that kind of demand on these people, well, some of these things they will retract, or whatever the case may be. But I do think it's important that we see the need to step forward. We see the need to step forward and not leave it for some who we think are more in control of the church than we are. No. Each one of us, wherever we find ourselves, has that responsibility. But I do think it's a question of more Catholics entering that space. People will always do silly things like that. Why they would pay more attention to the Muslims when they do that is that the Muslims can issue a fatwa on you. It's true. There's a violence that accompanies that. No, but we are not, I don't think our position should be that of crushing people. Our position should be that of educating and winning people over. And many of these things have been corrected in the past by someone going to meet that fellow and discussing with him, educating him. Because that is really, you not only educate the fellow, but you win him over. Rather than approaching with force or violence to say, take this down or whatever. No, I think there are different ways of handling this. And we, the laity, are in a better position to do much of that. The regulatory body, are there regulatory bodies to curtail this? There is, but there is a census board. But the census board has a very clear mandate in terms of dealing with things which are, I don't know, explicitly pornographic or things which will affect the security of the nation, so on and so forth. But in many of these other details which do not fall into that space, they will not. And actually what they do more is classify. They are making that clear these days, that they classify more. They do not really say your film is banned. It must really be something very serious for them to ban it. And you and I know that when you ban a film, you merely contribute to the marketing of that film. Once you ban it, everybody wants to see what is it that these fellows have banned. Okay, so really, I don't think in the long run it helps, because we merely end up helping that fellow to sell his film better. Thank you all for your questions.
Thank you so much. Please, a big round of applause for Doctor. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for that very enlightening session.